The diamonds on Geneviève Dubois's throat were said to have once belonged to exiled royalty, a cascade of ice and fire catching the light of 1,000 camera flashes. They called it the Monaco Star. As she stood on the arm of real estate magnate Declan Bishop at the Metropolitan Legacy Gala, she was the picture of triumph. Every society blog and gossip columnist was captivated, but across the ballroom, hidden in a quiet alcove, stood Declan's wife, Patricia. 7 months pregnant and dressed in understated navy silk, she held no jewels. Instead, clutched in her hand, was a single, folded piece of paper. It wasn't a society invitation or a doctor's note. It was a bank statement from an obscure Cayman Islands holding company, a document far more valuable and far more dangerous than any diamond in the room. The Bishop residence in Greenwich, Connecticut, was less a home and more a monument to success. A sprawling limestone edifice designed by Robert A.M. Stern, it boasted manicured lawns that rolled down to the Long Island Sound and interiors that were a curated gallery of minimalist art and bespoke furniture. For Patricia Bishop, for the past 6 months, it had felt like an exquisitely designed prison. At 34, Patricia possessed a quiet intelligence that was often mistaken for shyness. She had met Declan Bishop not at a charity ball, but in a boardroom. Armed with an MBA from Wharton, she had been the analytical engine behind the early explosive growth of Bishop Holdings. She was the one who could dissect a balance sheet in minutes, who saw the hidden risks in a leveraged buyout, and who structured the deals that made Declan the charismatic icon he was. They were a formidable team, his vision, her execution. Then came the pregnancy. It was planned, wanted, and celebrated. Declan had been ecstatic. "It's time, Cat," he'd said, his hand on her still flat stomach. "You've built this empire with me. Now build our family. Step back, rest. You've earned it." So she did. She handed over her duties as chief financial officer to a trusted deputy and embraced the quiet life of an expectant mother. At first it was a welcome respite, but soon the quiet curdled into silence. Declan, once home by 7 for dinner every night, began having late-night investor meetings. Business trips to Singapore and Dubai were extended by days without clear explanation. When he was home, he was distant. His phone always angled away from her, a faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume clinging to his suits, something floral and audacious, completely unlike her own subtle scent of sandalwood and citrus. The first concrete crack in her carefully constructed world appeared not with a bang, but with a line item on a credit card statement. It was an American Express Centurion card, the one reserved for their most extravagant personal expenses. Tucked between a charge for a case of 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild and a donation to the New York Philharmonic was a charge for $385,000 from a jeweler she didn't recognize, Laurent Duval, a private appointment-only atelier in Paris known for sourcing and setting historically significant gems. Patricia's heart went cold. Her anniversary was months away. Her birthday had just passed. This was not a gift for her. She didn't confront him. Her training had taught her that you never show your hand until you understand the entire game. Instead, she began to watch. She used her old, still active administrative access to the company's servers, telling herself it was just to stay sharp. Late at night, when Declan was asleep, or more often stuck in the city, she would sit in her home office, the glow of the monitor illuminating her focused face. She started with expense reports. There were dinners for 2 at Daniel and Persay charged as client entertainment. A suite at the Hotel Plaza Athénée in Paris for a week, booked during a supposed solo trip to check on their London office. Flights, gifts, a pattern of breathtaking expenditure, all cleverly disguised within the corporate labyrinth she herself had helped design. The name Geneviève Dubois appeared on a dinner reservation Declan had forwarded to his personal email. A quick, discreet search revealed a woman who was her opposite in every way. A former model turned brand ambassador. Geneviève was a creature of the society pages, all sharp angles, pouty lips, and a reputation for attaching herself to powerful men. Her Instagram was a curated fantasy of yacht decks, private jets, and 4 front-row seats at Fashion Week. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. It was a profound and absolute betrayal, not just of their vows, but of their partnership. He was using the very empire she'd bled to fund a sordid cliché. The man she loved, the father of her unborn child, was a stranger. But as the days turned into weeks, the initial searing pain began to cool and harden into something else, resolve. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about her child's future, about the legacy she had worked tirelessly to build. Declan was the face of the company, but she was its foundation. And she was beginning to suspect the foundation was being systematically eroded. The invitation to the Metropolitan Legacy Gala arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was the social event of the season, a night where New York's old money and new power collided. Declan had casually mentioned it. "We should go, Kat. Show off the bump. It'll be our last big night out for a while." She had agreed, a hollow feeling in her gut. She knew with a dreadful certainty that he wouldn't be going with her. That night, a week before the gala, he called, "Darling, I'm so sorry. The consortium for this Hudson Yards project just moved a critical meeting to tonight. It's unavoidable. You should still go represent us. You look beautiful." The lie was so bald, so insulting in its lack of effort. Patricia sat in the cavernous living room, the phone silent in her hand, and looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows. She saw a pregnant woman alone in a vast, empty house. A victim. And in that moment, she decided she would not be a victim. She would go to the gala. But she wouldn't go to represent us. She would go to gather intelligence. She would go to see with her own eyes the woman who was trying to steal her life. She had no idea that what she was about to find was so much worse than a simple affair. The night of the Metropolitan Legacy Gala was a symphony of orchestrated chaos. The air on the Upper East Side was thick with the scent of exhaust fumes and expensive perfume. Limousines lined the streets, for blocks depositing men in crisp tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than the average car. The steps of the museum were a gauntlet of flashing cameras and shouted names, a stage for the city's elite. Patricia arrived alone in the company's understated black Bentley. She had chosen her dress with strategic care, a deep navy silk column by Carolina Herrera that was elegant, conservative, and accommodated her 7-month pregnancy without making it the centerpiece. Her only jewelry was the simple platinum wedding band on her finger and a pair of diamond studs Declan had given her on their first anniversary. She was a picture of quiet dignity, the wife of Declan Bishop, a woman of substance. She bypassed the main scrum of photographers, giving a polite nod to a few journalists who recognized her. Inside the great hall was a glittering ocean of people. The theme was celestial bodies, and the room was a galaxy of sequins, diamonds, and ambition. Patricia took a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and found a discreet position in an alcove behind a marble statue of Perseus, affording her a clear view of the grand staircase. She didn't have to wait long. A fresh wave of camera flashes erupted from the entrance, more intense and frenzied than before. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and then they appeared at the top of the stairs. Declan looked impeccable in a Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly coiffed, a confident proprietary smile on his face. He was born for these moments, a master of public perception, and on his arm, draped in a shimmering silver gown that seemed poured onto her body, was Genevieve Dubois. She was even more striking in person, tall and impossibly slender, with high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to challenge the world. But it wasn't her beauty that seized the breath of everyone in the hall. It was the necklace. The Monaco star was a legend in jewelry circles. A flawless 20-carat pear-shaped diamond of impossible clarity, suspended from a platinum chain, encrusted with smaller, equally perfect stones. It was a piece of staggering, historical opulence. And it was around the neck of Declan Bishop's mistress. Patricia felt the air leave her lungs. The $385,000 charge from Laurent Duval. It wasn't for the whole necklace. It was likely just the finder's fee, the commission to source such a piece from a private collection. The necklace itself, it would be worth tens of millions. Corporate funds could not cover that. So where did the money come from? As Declan and Genevieve descended the stairs, they were a royal couple holding court. He would lean in and whisper something in her ear, and she would throw her head back and laugh, the diamonds scattering light across the room like shrapnel. They were not just attending an event. They were making a statement. This was a public declaration. Declan was not just having an affair. He was replacing his wife. The whispers started around Patricia. She could feel the stares, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Isn't that Declan Bishop? But where's Patricia? A woman in Oscar de la Renta murmured to her companion. I heard she's been unwell. The pregnancy. The other replied, her eyes locked on Genevieve. My God, look at that necklace. He's certainly not holding back. Patricia stood perfectly still, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. The baby kicked a small, insistent flutter against her palm. It was an anchor in the swirling vortex of humiliation. This was no longer just about her. She watched them work the room. Declan introducing Genevieve to his most important business partners. George Maxwell, the head of a major investment bank. Senator Pullman, whose support was critical for their new downtown development. And Genevieve playing her part to perfection, all charm and dazzling smiles, her hand possessively on Declan's arm. She wasn't just a guest. She was presenting herself as the future Mrs. Bishop. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Declan wasn't just cheating on her, he was erasing her. He was parading his infidelity in the most public forum imaginable, using his mistress as a symbol of his power and virility. He was leveraging the spectacle to enhance his own brand, assuming Patricia was at home pregnant, powerless, and weeping into her pillow. He had miscalculated. Patricia didn't cry. The shock had frozen the tears in her ducts. The humiliation was a fire burning away the last vestiges of the love she had felt for him, and forging something new in its place. It was a cold, hard, and utterly clear sense of purpose. She watched them for another 20 minutes, observing, gathering data, just as she would in a hostile negotiation. She saw the way Declan's eyes followed Genevieve, a mixture of lust and pride. She saw the way Genevieve's smile never quite reached her eyes, the constant subtle scan of the room to see who was watching. This was a performance, and Patricia knew she had to find the truth behind the stagecraft. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her obstetrician, a routine check-in. "Hope you're resting, Patricia. Remember to keep your stress levels down." A humorless smile touched her lips. She turned and walked away from the grand spectacle, slipping out a side door without a single goodbye. The cold night air hit her face like a slap. As her driver pulled the car around, she made a decision. She would not go home to her empty mansion. "Take me to the office, please," she said, her voice steady. "1 Bishop Plaza." The driver looked at her surprised in the rear-view mirror. "Ma'am?" "At this hour, yes," Patricia said, her eyes fixed on the glittering Manhattan skyline. "I have some work to do." 1 Bishop Plaza was a monument of glass and steel in the heart of Midtown, a testament to Declan's ambition and Patricia's meticulous financial planning. At 11:30 p.m. on the night of the gala, it was a ghost tower, its lobby silent and gleaming under the recessed lighting. The night security guard, a man named Frank, who had worked for them for years, did a double-take when he saw Patricia step out of the Bentley. "Mrs. Bishop, is everything all right?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Everything is fine, Frank. I just left something in my old office I need to retrieve," she lied smoothly. Her keycard still worked. The elevator ascended in silence, the only sound the soft hum of the machinery. She walked down the plushly carpeted hallway of the 48th floor, the executive level. Her old office, the CFO's office, was next to Declan's corner suite. It had been kept largely as she had left it, a shrine to the woman who had been the company's financial architect. She sat in her old leather chair, the familiar contours a strange comfort. The city lights twinkled below a sea of indifferent stars. For a moment she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. The image of Genevieve's diamonds was burned into her mind. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the sheer reckless scale of it. A necklace of that value couldn't be purchased with a simple credit card. It required a wire transfer, a significant liquidation of assets. Assets that by law and by contract were half hers. She booted up the computer. Her credentials never rescinded, granted her top-tier access. Declan, in his arrogance, had never imagined she would use them. He saw her as Patricia, his pregnant wife, not Patricia Bishop, the Wharton MBA, who knew where every digital body in his empire was buried. She didn't start with the main corporate accounts of Bishop Holdings. That would be too obvious, too easily tracked. Declan was reckless, but he wasn't a complete fool. He would have hidden it. She started where she knew the real work was done, in the labyrinthine network of LLCs and shell corporations they had set up for liability protection and tax optimization on their various projects. It was a complex web, and she was its weaver. For hours she worked. The silence of the office was broken only by the click of her keyboard and the soft whir of the computer. She cross-referenced Declan's travel expenses with wire transfers from subsidiary accounts. She found the purchase of a penthouse apartment at 15 Central Park West, not under his name, but under a shell company, GD Enterprises LLC. The initials were almost laughably obvious. Genevieve Dubois. The property was purchased 6 months ago for $22.5 million, an all-cash deal. Her breath hitched. This was far beyond funding a lavish lifestyle. This was the systematic transfer of marital and corporate assets. She dug deeper. Her fingers flying across the keyboard. She followed the digital breadcrumbs, tracing the source of the $22.5 million. It hadn't come from a single account. It had been siphoned in smaller, less conspicuous amounts from multiple project budgets over the course of a year. The overage from the concrete budget on the Philadelphia Tower. The consulting fees from the Miami beachfront condo. The inflated marketing expenses from the Chicago project. Hundreds of thousands here, a million there. It was death by 1,000 cuts, a sophisticated embezzlement scheme hidden in plain sight, disguised as the cost of doing business. And Declan could never have pulled it off on his own. He didn't have the patience or the financial subtlety. He had help. She pulled the access logs for the specific accounting servers involved. A name popped up that made her blood run cold. Robert Fletcher, the new CFO, the man she had personally trained and trusted to be her successor. He was complicit. He had helped Declan cook the books. This was no longer a matter for a divorce attorney. This was a matter for the SEC and the district attorney. This was corporate fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The final piece of the puzzle was the necklace. A purchase of that magnitude would require a clean source of funds, something outside the traceable corporate structure. It would need to come from a personal slush fund. She knew Declan had an offshore account they had set up years ago in the Cayman Islands as a contingency fund. It was meant for emergencies, for seizing unique investment opportunities that required speed and discretion. Its official name was Bishop Global Strategies. She had the account details memorized. With trembling hands, she navigated through a series of secure portals and two-factor authentications. Her access was still valid. The account login screen appeared. She typed in the password and held her breath. Access granted. The statement loaded on the screen. The balance, which should have been close to $50 million, was nearly depleted. She scrolled through the transaction history. There were dozens of transfers to GD Enterprises. And then she saw it. A single wire transfer dated 2 weeks prior for $28 million. The recipient was a numbered Swiss bank account associated with Laurent Duval, the Parisian jeweler. There it was, the smoking gun. Not just proof of the affair, but irrefutable proof of a massive, fraudulent transfer of funds from a joint asset account. He had drained their family's emergency fund to hang a trophy around his mistress's neck. Patricia leaned back in her chair, a wave of dizziness washing over her. The scope of the deception was monstrous. He was willing to risk their entire empire, their liberty, for this woman. He had betrayed not only her, but their shareholders, their employees, and the law. With a shaking hand, she clicked print. The printer on the credenza hummed to life, spitting out the single-page bank statement from Bishop Global Strategies. She folded the warm paper and slipped it into her handbag. As the first hints of dawn began to streak the sky over the East River, Patricia Bishop walked out of the office tower. She was no longer just a scorned wife. She was an adver, and she held the weapon that could bring Declan's entire world crashing down. Patricia didn't go home. She went to a place that represented safety intellect and absolute, unwavering loyalty, the Upper West Side brownstone of Mr. Arthur Peterson. Arthur Peterson was 72 years old, with a mind as sharp as a shard of glass, and a reputation for being one of the most feared and respected litigation attorneys in New York. He had been her father's lawyer, his mentor, and his closest friend. When her father passed away, Arthur had transferred that fierce loyalty to Patricia. He was a lion in winter, a man who had seen every form of human greed and folly, and was impressed by none of it. She rang the bell at 6:00 a.m. He answered the door himself, dressed in a silk robe, a copy of Thucydides in his hand. His silver hair was perfectly combed, and his piercing blue eyes took in her appearance, the evening gown from the night before the exhaustion etched on her face, the defiant set of her jaw. "Patricia," he said, his voice a low rumble. He stepped aside. "Come in. The coffee is brewing." He didn't ask questions as he led her to his library, a room panelled in dark cherry wood and lined floor to ceiling with books on law history and philosophy. He poured her a cup of coffee, added a touch of cream without asking, and sat opposite her in a worn leather armchair. He simply waited. Patricia took a deep breath, the scent of old paper and fresh coffee calming her frayed nerves. She started from the beginning. The distance, the suspicions, the credit card charge. She recounted the humiliating spectacle at the Gala, describing the Monaco star with clinical precision. Then she detailed her late-night investigation, the discovery of GD Enterprises, the fraudulent expense reports, the complicity of Robert Fletcher, and the siphoning of millions from corporate accounts. Finally, she reached into her handbag, her hand steady now, and placed the folded bank statement on the polished mahogany table between them. "This is from our personal contingency fund in the Caymans," she said. "A $28 million wire transfer to the jeweler 2 weeks ago." Arthur picked up the paper. He put on a pair of reading glasses and scanned the document. His face, already grim, hardened into a mask of cold fury. He read it once, then a second time, his legal mind deconstructing the implications of every number. "He drained Bishop Global," Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The fool. The arrogant, short-sighted fool." He placed the statement down and looked at Patricia, his gaze softening with a paternal concern that almost broke her composure. "What do you want to do, my dear?" This was the question she had been asking herself all night. What did she want? Revenge to see Declan and Genevieve ruined, their faces splashed across the tabloids. The thought brought a grim, fleeting satisfaction. But it wasn't the answer. "I want to protect my child," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I want to save the company. My father helped me build it. Our employees, our investors. They don't deserve to be ruined by his weakness. I don't want to destroy Bishop Holdings. I want to take control of it." A slow smile spread across Arthur Peterson's face. This was the Patricia he knew, not the victim, but the strategist. "Good," he said, leaning forward. "Destruction is easy. Control requires skill. A messy public divorce and a fraud lawsuit would send the company into a tailspin. The stock would plummet. Competitors would circle like sharks. We need to handle this like a surgical strike, not a demolition." For the next 2 hours, they planned. Arthur, with his decades of legal experience, outlined the strategy. They had Declan cornered on multiple fronts. On the personal front, the blatant infidelity and dissipation of marital assets gave them immense leverage in any divorce proceeding. But the corporate fraud was the true cudgel. "He is facing at minimum 20 years in a federal prison," Arthur stated calmly. "Robert Fletcher as well. They have falsified corporate records, defrauded shareholders, and committed wire fraud across state lines. The moment we place a call to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Declan Bishop, as you know him, ceases to exist." "But we won't make that call," Patricia said, understanding the strategy. "Not yet." "Precisely." Arthur nodded. "We don't use the threat to send him to prison. We use it to force a complete and total capitulation. He will sign over his controlling shares, his voting rights, everything. He will cede the entire empire, not to you directly, that would look like a hostile takeover, but to a trust. an irrevocable trust for the benefit of his unborn child. Patricia saw the brilliance of it. It was clean. It was legally ironclad. The company would be secured for the next generation. Declan would be left with a title, a handsome stipend to maintain his lifestyle, but zero actual power. He would become a ghost in his own machine. "And Fletcher?" Patricia asked. "Fletcher will be our instrument of transition. We will approach him separately. We offer him a choice, become a state's witness, and cooperate fully in the internal restructuring or face indictment alongside Declan. He will choose to save himself," Arthur predicted with certainty. "And Genevieve." The name was bitter on Patricia's tongue. "The money for the apartment and the necklace came from fraudulent sources. They are proceeds of a crime. We will use legal instruments to claw back every single dollar. The penthouse will be seized. The Monaco Star will be returned. Miss Dubois will be left with nothing but a very large tax bill and a tarnished reputation." Patricia felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled her. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about restoring order to a world that had been thrown into chaos by one man's ego. Arthur stood up and walked to his desk. He picked up a pen. "I will have my team draft the transfer agreements and the trust documents. They will be ready by tomorrow afternoon. We will arrange a meeting. Not here, not at your home. A neutral ground, a boardroom at my firm. You, me, Declan, and his lawyer, though I suspect he'll be foolish enough to come alone." He looked at Patricia, his eyes filled with a fierce pride. "You go home now. Get some sleep. Rest for your baby. Let me sharpen the knives." As Patricia left the brownstone, the morning sun was bathing the city in a cool, clear light. She felt exhausted, but for the first time in months, she also felt powerful. She wasn't the millionaire's wife anymore. She was the woman holding the bank statement, and she was about to rewrite the future. The law firm of Cromwell and Stern occupied 3 floors of the Seagram building, an icon of corporate power on Park Avenue. The boardroom Arthur Peterson had chosen for the meeting was a masterpiece of intimidating minimalism. A 20-foot-long slab of polished granite surrounded by Eames chairs enclosed on 3 sides by floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the city. It was a room designed to make one feel small and exposed. Patricia arrived first with Arthur. She was dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored maternity business dress, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon. She looked calm, composed her face an unreadable mask. She held a leather portfolio containing her copies of the evidence. Declan arrived precisely at 2:30 p.m. alone. He strode into the room with his signature brand of easy confidence, a smile on his face, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. He had clearly misinterpreted the reason for the meeting, assuming it was the first step in a standard messy divorce negotiation. "Patricia," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Arthur. A bit formal, don't you think? We could have discussed this at home." "We are long past discussing things at home, Declan," Patricia said, her voice level and cold. She did not stand. Declan's smile faltered. He looked from Patricia's implacable face to Arthur's grim expression. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. He sat down opposite them. "All right," he said, shifting into business mode. "Let's hear it. Your terms. I assume this is about the gala. It was a mistake, I admit. I'll be generous, Patricia. More than generous." Arthur Peterson slid a single sheet of paper across the granite table. It was the bank statement from Bishop Global Strategies. Declan glanced at it. His face went pale. The confident facade dissolved in an instant, replaced by a raw animal fear. He looked up at Patricia, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. He finally understood. This wasn't about the affair. "How?" he stammered. "My admin access was never revoked," Patricia stated flatly. "You should have been more thorough." She then calmly, methodically laid out her case. She spoke not with the emotion of a betrayed wife, but with the dispassionate precision of a prosecutor. She detailed the shell company, GD Enterprises. She listed the exact amounts siphoned from specific project budgets. She named Robert Fletcher as his co-conspirator. She described the purchase of the penthouse and the wire transfer for the Monaco Star. "This isn't a divorce negotiation, Declan," she concluded, her voice unwavering. "This is your one and only chance to avoid federal prison." Declan stared at her, utterly broken. The charismatic visionary was gone, replaced by a cornered man sweating in his expensive suit. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Cat, think of the scandal, the company, our child." "I have thought of nothing else," she retorted, her voice sharp. "Which is why we are here. You have squandered corporate funds, committed wire fraud, and embezzled from your own family. You have proven yourself unfit to lead this company and unfit to be the steward of our child's legacy." Arthur Peterson spoke for the first time, his voice like stones grinding together. "Here is the situation, Mr. Bishop. We have prepared a series of documents. You will sign them today, right now, or I will make a phone call to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. I have him on speed dial." He placed a thick stack of documents in front of Declan. "This first document," Arthur explained, "is an irrevocable transfer of your 51% controlling interest in Bishop Holdings to a blind trust. The sole beneficiary of this trust will be your child. As the child's mother and legal guardian, Patricia will be named the trustee, giving her complete operational and voting control of the company until the child comes of age." Declan looked at the papers as if they were a death sentence. "The second document," Arthur continued, "is a post-nuptial agreement. It states that in the event of a divorce, you will waive all claims to any assets acquired during the marriage in consideration for Patricia, refraining from pursuing criminal charges. You will be granted a stipend of $5 million per year, paid from the trust to maintain your lifestyle. You will retain your seat on the board, but with no voting rights. You will be a figurehead, a ghost." "And what about Fletcher?" Declan asked, his voice hoarse. "Mr. Fletcher has already been contacted." Arthur lied, a brilliant tactical move. "He is cooperating fully to save his own skin." Declan slumped in his chair, the fight completely gone out of him. He saw the checkmate. He had no moves left. Patricia and Arthur had built a perfect cage, and he had walked right into it. "And Genevieve?" he asked, a pathetic last-ditch effort to salvage something. "The penthouse at 15 Central Park West, having been purchased with stolen funds, will be seized and liquidated by the trust." Patricia answered, her voice devoid of emotion. "A legal demand has already been sent to Laurent Duval and Miss Dubois for the immediate return of the Monaco Star. If it is not returned within 48 hours, they will be named as co-conspirators in a criminal complaint for receipt of stolen property." Declan finally looked at Patricia. Truly looked at her. He wasn't seeing his quiet, supportive wife. He was seeing the brilliant, ruthless strategist he had once admired, and perhaps he now realized had always feared. The woman he had so fatally underestimated. He picked up the pen, his hand shaking. One by one, he signed the documents that stripped him of his power, his wealth, and his future. He signed away his empire. When he was finished, he pushed the papers back across the table. He stood up, a man hollowed out from the inside. He didn't say another word. He simply turned and walked out of the glass boardroom, leaving his life behind him on the granite table. Patricia watched him go, feeling not triumph, but a profound and weary sadness for the man he could have been. Then she placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked, and the sadness was replaced by a surge of fierce, protective love. The battle was over. Now it was time to build a new legacy. The fallout was both seismic and silent. To the outside world, nothing had changed. Declan Bishop was still seen at charity events. His name was still on the letterhead. But within the walls of One Bishop Plaza, the shift in power was absolute and immediate. Patricia, as trustee, convened an emergency board meeting. She didn't reveal the sordid details of Declan's fraud. Instead, she presented a coolly logical case for a corporate restructuring, citing market instabilities and the need for more direct financial oversight. With her newly acquired voting control, the motions passed unanimously. Robert Fletcher, faced with the choice Arthur Peterson had laid out for him in a separate, terrifying meeting, resigned for personal reasons, and Patricia reassumed the title of Chief Financial Officer in addition to her role as trustee. The company barely skipped a beat. She was back where she belonged, and the employees and investors who had always respected her acumen felt a renewed sense of stability. Declan became a phantom. He attended meetings but never spoke. He occupied his corner office but made no decisions. The charisma that had once filled every room now seemed like a cheap parlor trick. He was a king in eggs living in the castle while the new queen ran the kingdom. Their life at the Greenwich estate became a silent truce. They were two strangers cohabitating for the sake of appearances until the baby was born, after which he would quietly move out. For Genevieve Dubois, the unraveling was far more public and brutal. It began when two grim-faced lawyers from Cromwell and Stern, accompanied by a representative from an insurance underwriter, appeared at her new penthouse. They presented her with a court order demanding the immediate surrender of the Monaco Star, citing its purchase with criminally obtained funds. Genevieve, wrapped in a silk robe and sipping champagne, at first laughed at them. "This was a gift. You can't just take it." The lead lawyer simply slid a file across her marble coffee table. "Miss Dubois, this file contains evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud. You are currently in possession of its most significant proceeds. You can either return the necklace now, or we can have the U.S. Marshals, who are waiting downstairs, arrest you for receipt of stolen property. The choice is yours." The color drained from her face. The champagne glass trembled in her hand. The life she had so carefully curated was dissolving before her eyes. The diamonds, which had been her symbol of arrival and victory, were now a lead weight dragging her under. Defeated, she surrendered the necklace. Worse was to come. A week later, she was served with eviction notices. The penthouse, the trust's asset, was being sold. Her newfound friends in high society, smelling the stench of scandal and financial ruin, stopped answering her calls. The invitations dried up. Declan, her supposed savior, was a ghost, unable and unwilling to help her. Her final desperate act was to leak a version of the story to a gossip columnist she knew, painting herself as the heartbroken victim of a cruel, jealous wife. The story ran in page 6, "Billionaire's baby mama freezes out, model girlfriend." But it backfired spectacularly. Arthur Peterson's office released a terse, devastatingly effective statement. "We do not comment on private family matters. However, we can confirm that Bishop Holdings is conducting a full internal audit, regarding the misappropriation of corporate assets by former executives. We will cooperate fully with any and all legal authorities. The words misappropriation and former executives shifted the entire narrative. Suddenly, Genevieve wasn't a wronged lover. She was potentially implicated in a financial crime. The story died overnight. No one wanted to be associated with that kind of trouble. Stripped of her jewels, her home, and her benefactor, Genevieve Dubois, disappeared from the New York social scene as quickly as she had arrived. A cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Patricia paid little attention to the drama. Her focus was singular, the company, and her baby. She spent her days at the office, calmly untangling the financial mess Declan had created, streamlining operations and reassuring investors. She discovered the fraud was even deeper than she had initially realized. Declan had been using company funds to prop up risky personal side ventures that were all failing. Methodically, she cut the losses, shored up the foundations, and steered the ship back on course. She worked with a quiet, relentless efficiency that earned her a new level of respect from the board and her employees. They had known her as the quiet planner behind the charismatic front man. Now they saw her as the formidable leader who had saved them from the brink. She wasn't Declan Bishop's wife. She was Patricia Bishop, the woman in charge. 2 months after the silent coup in the glass boardroom, in the sterile quiet of a private suite at Lenox Hill Hospital, Patricia gave birth to a healthy 7-pound baby boy. She named him Andrew, a strong classic name, her father's name. As she held him in her arms for the first time, the sterile quiet bloomed into a profound peace. His tiny fingers curled around her index finger, a grip of surprising strength. Looking down at his small, perfect face, she felt the last year of pain, betrayal, and icy resolve melt away, replaced by a wave of love so fierce and absolute it was breathtaking. This tiny, vulnerable life was the reason for every hard decision, every sleepless night, every ounce of strength she had been forced to summon. He was not just the heir to an empire. He was the architect of her rebirth. Declan's visit was a study in dissonance. He arrived bearing an ostentatious bouquet of white orchids that seemed to wilt in the room's quiet intimacy. He stood by the bedside, his bespoke suit looking out of place, his posture stiff and uncertain. He was a visitor in what should have been his own life. He looked at Andrew nestled in Patricia's arms, and a complex emotion flickered in his eyes. Pride, regret, and the bitter recognition of his own irrelevance. He has your eyes," Declan stammered, the first words spoken into the heavy silence. "Yes, he does," Patricia replied, her voice soft but not inviting. There was no anger left in her, only a vast, empty space where her love for this man used to be. She looked at him and saw not the titan of industry or the husband who had shattered her heart, but a diminished figure, a ghost haunting the edges of a future he had forfeited. He was the father of her child, a biological fact that could never be erased, but he was no longer her partner. He was no longer the center of her world. The center of her world was asleep in her arms. He offered a few more stilted congratulations, asked perfunctory questions about the delivery, and then, after 10 agonizing minutes, he retreated from the room. Patricia knew as she watched him go that this was the true end. Their marriage was a contract, their home a shared space, but their life together was over. The year that followed was a blur of focused intensity. Patricia navigated the strange duality of her new life with a grace that surprised even herself. By day, she was the formidable head of Bishop Holdings. She sat at the head of the long granite table in the main boardroom, Declan's old seat, and commanded the room not with charisma and bluster, but with quiet competence and irrefutable logic. She dismantled the toxic culture of risk and ego that Declan had fostered, replacing it with one of integrity, innovation, and strategic patience. Free from the constant drain of his vanity projects and fraudulent siphoning, the company flourished. Profits soared, the stock price climbed steadily, and the financial press began to speak of the Bishop Renaissance, hailing Patricia Bishop as a quiet visionary. By night, she was simply Mama. She would leave the gleaming tower of corporate power and return to the quiet warmth of the Greenwich estate, which she was slowly transforming from a cold monument into a true home. She traded board reports for bedtime stories and market projections for the simple, perfect joy of watching her son take his first steps. Many nights, she would work late in her home office, one screen showing complex financial models, the other showing the grainy black-and-white image from the baby monitor in Andrew's room. She was building two legacies at once, one of steel and glass, the other of love and family. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year and a half after the night of the gala. Patricia was in her office overlooking the city. The space was now hers, redecorated in calming shades of grey and blue. The walls adorned not with abstract art, but with framed architectural plans for the company's new sustainable housing initiative. On her desk, in a place of honor next to her computer, was a silver-framed photo of a smiling, red-cheeked toddler chasing a golden retriever on a sun-drenched lawn. Her assistant's voice came over the intercom. "Ma'am, a package has arrived for you by courier. It's from the Sotheby's Acquisitions Department." Curious, Patricia had the small, flat box brought in. She slit the tape with a letter opener. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a single magnificent pear-shaped diamond. It was the Monaco star, now loose unburdened from the platinum chain that had once held it. A small card noted that the trust, as part of its asset recovery protocol, had successfully reacquired the stone at a private auction. Seeing it again was a physical shock. For a split second, she was no longer in her corner office. She was back in the shadows of the gala, the scent of champagne and perfume in the air, the sound of Genevieve's triumphant laughter echoing in her ears. The diamond was not just a stone, it was a repository of her deepest humiliation, a symbol of her world cracking apart. She reached into the box and picked it up. It felt cold and impossibly heavy in her palm, a perfect, flawless piece of crystallized carbon. It had been purchased with stolen money to adorn another woman's throat. It had been meant as a public declaration of her replacement. It was a weapon that had been wielded against her with stunning cruelty. But as she held it, turning it over in the afternoon light, a profound shift occurred. The pain began to recede. The ghost of the memory lost its power. She was not the same woman who had stood trembling in that alcove. That woman was gone, burned away in the fire of betrayal, and reforged into the person she was today. The diamond was no longer a weapon against her. It was simply an asset, a number on a balance sheet in her son's multi-billion-dollar trust. Its emotional power had been neutralized by her own success. Her gaze drifted from the cold fire of the diamond to the warm, vibrant life in the photograph of her son. Andrew, her legacy. She knew then what she would do. The stone would never be sold for mere profit, nor would it ever again be worn as a symbol of status. One day, many years from now, when Andrew was old enough to understand the complexities of the world, she would give it to him. She would place it in his hand and tell him the whole story, not as a bitter tale of infidelity and revenge, but as a lesson. This, she would tell him, is a lesson in value. Some people will see this stone and see only wealth, glamour, and power. They will covet it. They will lie and steal for it. But its true value lies in the story it tells. She would tell him how it was used to try and break his mother, and how instead it made her stronger. She would explain that true power isn't found in what you can hang around your neck, but in the intelligence, integrity, and resilience you hold inside. It was a lesson about the difference between a hollow, glittering charade and the quiet, unshakable strength of a foundation built on truth. The empire he would one day inherit wasn't Declan's anymore. It was Andrew's, and it was saved and secured by his mother, who had faced down a king, not with a crown of diamonds, but with a folded piece of paper and the unbreakable will to protect her son's future. That night at the gala, the world saw a story of glamour and betrayal, a mistress adorned in splendor, and a wife cast into the shadows. But the real story wasn't written in the gossip columns. It was written in the cold, hard numbers of a bank statement. It's a powerful reminder that true power isn't always what's on public display. Sometimes it's the quiet intelligence, the meticulous preparation, and the unwavering courage to fight for what is rightfully yours. Patricia's story is more than just about a scorned wife getting even. It's about a woman reclaiming her power, protecting her family's future, and proving that substance will always triumph over spectacle. What would you have done in Patricia's position? Could you have shown the same restraint and strategic thinking? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of quiet strength and calculated victory resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story where the real hero isn't the one making the most noise. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next gripping tale.